All right, welcome to the JBJ Management Podcast. It's a Let's Talk About It podcast. And today we're going a little different. We've been going group session, but somebody on our team said, let's do one-on-ones. And so we're going to go through a series of one-on-one interviews with our vice presidents. I'm trying to figure out, how do I introduce Vice President Edmonds? Well, you can hung it off right there. That's it right there. Jon Edmonds, need not say anymore. Been to Dallas since 1997.
That's correct. That's right.
Came from Indianapolis, Indiana.
That's right.
What brought you, first of all, let's get a little background. How did you get from Indianapolis to Dallas?
Right. So I was running an organization called the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. We were funded by Lilly Endowment, and we were established to revitalize neighborhoods in Indianapolis. And so after 2 presidential awards,
Wow.
I received one, and the organization received one. One under the George Bush administration and one under the Clinton administration. So bipartisan awards. But after 2 of those, I got a call. I got a call from a guy named Billy Allen, who you know.
I do. I do.
But I got a call from Billy Allen, who said that he was a recruiter, an executive recruiter and a headhunter. I didn't know Billy at that time, know him very well now. But I got a call from Billy Allen. Billy told me about a guy who was looking for what he called the best person in America to do neighborhood revitalization. And so he talked about Don Williams, who was the chairman and CEO of the Trammell Crow Company. And Don had established a foundation to focus on neighborhood revitalization, predominantly in the southern sector of Dallas. And that's where the conversation started. And to make a very long conversation short, Lois and I ended up relocating to Dallas, which we had no experience with. I'd never been to Dallas, didn't know anybody in Dallas.
How in the world could you live and never been to Dallas? You know, people go to New York, they go to LA.
It's a long way. It's 1,000 miles from home, brother. So we didn't know anybody here. Oh, we didn't want to take it back. We didn't know E.K. Bailey, who my pastor in Indianapolis.
Somebody to know.
My pastor in Indianapolis and E.K. were classmates at Bishop College, and E.K. used to come to Indianapolis and do revivals. So I did know E.K. Bailey and joined his church 1 week after we got here.
Now, was that when E.K. was he still on Polk?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we made that walk from Polk over to Boulder, which is now E.K. Bailey, or Pastor Bailey Drive. But we made that march from Polk to Boulder when Concord bought the new church, when we bought the church.
What's interesting about Pastor Bailey is I still remember it. It was a front page story in the Dallas Morning News. And this is all relative. Pastor Bailey had grown so fast on Polk Street, and they talked about the 5,000 members. That's the first time people heard the word mega church. Was E.K. Bailey on Polk Street.
Right.
They were doing 2 services. Later on, we were going to do a thing called the Bishop 5. Well, what I didn't know until later, that the 8 o'clock service oftentimes was Freddie Haynes, Jeffrey Johnson, Denny Davis, Anthony Sharp, Kerry Wesley, who went on to become the Bishop 5. And so all much younger than Pastor Bailey, but all had matriculated at the college at Bishop College. And so when we talk about revitalizing the community, that's one of the things that and I remember I had heard of Jon Edmonds, But one day I was at the Adolphus Hotel. I was walking in. I don't know who I was meeting, but there's a little lobby area and then there's a dining area. You were having breakfast with somebody,
Okay.
with a group of people. And I was walking past with a couple other people that had breakfast. And it was like two lions just noticed one another in passing. And here we are today, together again. And we're still talking about in our business, John, we are talking about revitalization. We're talking about how we work with government relations, how we work with public relations. That's what JBJ management does. And so we wanted to do a series of conversations with our vice presidents about how to operate as an African-American firm in the corporate world, but also let's first talk about how we operate in COVID. How does an African-American firm, just in your opinion, doesn't matter what the firm is, how does a firm operate in COVID these days when people are going out of business?
I think, personally, I think, Willis, that is a critical question for every business, and particularly every business owner to ask themselves right now. So kind of hook this thing up. One of the things that I lived on and learned in doing neighborhood revitalization and all that is that you have to, it's a couple different things. One, as an individual, you have to understand that when you serve people, you're at your best. And you really have to understand that. And so being able to relate to people that you serve, being able to relate to your customers, your clients, be able to relate to them in such a way that you understand their needs and you're doing all you can to meet those needs. That's universal, regardless of what business you're in. And so, as it relates to this COVID season, I think that it's just imperative that every particularly Black-owned business at this time ask themselves that question. How do I serve in this season? And I think that it means that we have to become even more professional in how we serve our customers. We have to become even more professional in how we relate to people, how we interact with folk. And I think when we do that, folk will even have a higher appreciation for the professionalism that we bring.
Because you do have to think about this. As a customer, you'll go out of your way if you feel like you're going to get good service, because service is different now. You're not, like, for instance, we're having the social distance in our podcast. We got our masks. We're 6 feet apart. We don't have all of our people. Normally, we would have 5 or 6 people in here.
Right.
So if you're going to a restaurant, or if you're going to get somebody to do some work at your home, or if you need to get your oil changed, you're saying that customer service is key to survival.
I think even more so. And we have to overcome some societal mores or stigmas that we may have had before. One of the things I know, this is family talk, so let me just say a couple of things. As an African American who has been in a president and CEO seat, it's hard for me to say, but I have noticed throughout the years that there is a difference, and sometimes good and sometimes not as good, but there is a difference in how African American employees related to me as a president and CEO, and how Anglo employees related to me as a president and CEO. And the real question is, as an African American employee, did I treat that African American CEO like I would have treated any other CEO? That's an important question, because that means this, I think. That means that we are so familiar sometimes with each other that when I walk into an establishment as a customer, I'm not looked at as a valuable customer as much as I'm looked at as another brother or another sister. And so I may be treated differently. I may be treated less than because I'm not looked on as the valuable customer that I really am, because I'm bringing my money and I'm bringing my support to that business. And so if we kind of turn that around and look at it from that business perspective, that means that I need to ask myself, how do I operate in this COVID season to the people that I may be familiar with? And I have to look at them even more valuable. Now they're more valuable to me because in this season, it's harder to attract somebody. I should be more grateful that I have the opportunity to serve. And so I need to treat them with that much value. And not every business is doing that right now.
Which leads me to a whole nother topic about being in the business, as how does an African American business survive? Just general, not in COVID. I think about in 1995, just a couple of years before you got here, Ron Kirk was elected mayor of Dallas. And I had been Ron's friend for years. We met when we were 18 years old. But it was interesting how, as you say, African Americans oftentimes treated Ron or Mayor Kirk differently.
Correct.
Because of the color of his skin.
Yeah.
The expectations were different because of the color of his skin. So do we put too much pressure on the African American in charge, expecting the brother hookup? Is that something that we innately do, subliminally we do, or what is that?
I don't know. I think it's probably just familiarity. We're comfortable with each other to the point where we don't really we don't think about it as much as in business transactional terms as we do as in personal terms and personal interaction. And again, I go back to saying that's what I think in this season, as an African American owned business, I have to ask myself that question. I have to be able to say, how can I treat this person, not in personal relationship terms as much as in professional relationship terms. And in doing so, I think we'll be stronger and we'll survive more. And at the same time, I think it means that our companies will be stronger and more acceptable generally.
So where is the Black business culture now? Years ago, we talked about how we had more continuity, we had more unity, we had more support. It was interesting to me that a lot of people had not heard of the Tulsa massacre. But Black people were doing business with each other then. This is not the first time. And before integration, we had hotels, we had banks, we had newspapers. And now, as old folks say, once we found that the white man's ice was colder. So how do we support each other now, John, in this new environment of, I don't know, 2-3 generations after integration now? How do we support each other?
Yeah. Well, we did it before. And I think, we did it then because we had to because of segregation. We couldn't interact with other businesses.
Correct.
We were segregated. But the bottom line is we did it before. And what we learned from that is that there were forces that were coming in to divide that. They didn't want to see that kind of success. Go back to the Tulsa massacre. Because it was so successful, there were outside forces to come in to really make sure that didn't happen.
Overtly.
Now, I think that we have to, and those same forces, a good word, because those same forces now may not be as overt, but they're covert now, still the same goal. And the goal is not to allow that to happen. So I think we have to be enlightened enough to overcome that as businesses. We have to be enlightened enough to say, we are good enough. We are excellent enough. We can compete well enough to compete in all spheres. We can compete in the general sphere of business, and we can compete in the specific sphere of dealing with each other. And we're astute enough to do that. And it's one of the things we have to be aware of. And one of the reasons why we have to continue to challenge ourselves to be even more professional.
So with that word professional, so we've made it our purpose as a company at JBJ Management not to be, and this is a difficult statement and question. We're downtown Dallas in a high rise, and we do business with corporate America, but we also do business in the hood.
Correct.
We have the ability to do both. But sometimes our company is viewed as, oh, they left the plantation. They not with us anymore. Oh, they big time. They've moved on up. How do you respond to they've moved on up and they've left us and they've left the plantation? How do you respond to that?
I don't know if you can. The only response is to continue to do business and to do it well. So whoever the customer is, you keep those doors open. So whether that's a business in the hood that wants to do business with us, our doors are open and our services are going to remain excellent. Or whether that's one of the Fortune 50s, our doors are open and our service is going to remain excellent. And I think after that, you're going to have people that talk and naysayers, but I don't think we can listen to those voices too much. What our focus has to be on is the continuation of providing excellent service.
So with that, so then there's a pricing situation.
Yeah. I know where you're going.
Because oftentimes there are, and it's hard for people to understand this, there are people of color who look like you, and they say, no, man, just hook me up. Or they don't want to pay your fee. And then there's the other side of town who think, what? How is that fee? Y'all gonna charge us that? That's too much. Y'all a black firm. Y'all not worth that. So then that leaves the black firm in a bind on how to grow, because you got two sides struggling to pay your fee, to pay you what you think you're worth. Yeah. How do you handle that, John?
I think that's a conversation, and really to me, that's a George Floyd era and COVID season era conversation right now. We need to be having that conversation right now. Now, as it relates to our charging and having hookups, I think it's just got to be understood that this is business and we really don't have time. We're going to try to help and understand and be sensitive as much as we can, but there's only so far you can go. And so, brother, sister, this is our fee structure, and we're going to pretty much hold to that. And we'll try to figure out how we can help you. Then as you talked about, on the other side of town, I think we have to get into a very serious conversation right now, because in my estimation, and this is just my personal opinion, but in my estimation, that's a part of the systemic racism that's still in play in the business community right now. Because the reality is, and you know it as well as I do, the reality is that there are other marketing and management companies that are our competitors right now that can and do demand 3 times what our fees are at JBJ. 3 times. So,
and get it.
So if we're charging $10,000 a month, we're aware that there are companies that are charging $30,000 a month for the same services that we're providing. As a matter of fact, I'll be so bold and so arrogant to say that the services they're providing really don't compete with what we're providing. But our fee, $10,000 versus $30,000. And so I think that conversation has to be had right now. It has to be had in the business community and the associations. That conversation has to be had right now, because that's a reality in Dallas, Texas today. That's a reality.
And both sides are struggling with how to pay you either way. The North Dallas side or the South Dallas side.
Right.
Which leads me to, I remember my dad was a minister, and John, I never did see Bonanza. Bonanza used to come on Sunday night, 8:00, because we had Sunday night service, and so I never did see Bonanza. But after church, we would go to a hotel downtown Gladewater. We'd go in the alleyway, and the head chef was a guy named Sam, and Sam always had the best meat waiting for my dad and two or three other people in the hood. And what we would do, Sam would come by our house on Monday, because we had a big garden.
Mm-hmm.
And he could get a mess of collard greens, turnip greens. We'd get some sweet potatoes, some Kentucky Wonder beans. So we had 2 or 3 bushels for him in exchange for that best meat.
So there was a bartering situation going on.
Now, what the white folk didn't know in that hotel was that they were not getting the best meat. But that's because Sam was on the inside. He's the head chef. He knew that we couldn't come in the front door, but he would meet us in the alleyway. So yes, there was a bartering system. And I wonder, when we get into these diversity positions, and so you've got people of color in corporate America that have a chance, they know you really can't come through the front. Do they have an obligation to help grow you in the back?
Wow. Now that's a deep question. That's a deep question. And I think my answer to that would be to say I think that the ideal is to be able to bring equality without the exception. So maybe as an interim step, the answer to your scenario may be yes. As an ultimate step, we have to continue to fight the good fight to make equality, as opposed to a forced programmatic type of equality. And so, interim, yes. But again, that's why I'm saying some hard conversations got to go on to say we need to be able to bring that good meat all the time to anybody who's willing to step up and buy it.
Dallas may be the only city in America that has as much leadership or in positions of authority that's Black.
Yeah.
You got a mayor, police, fire chief, district attorney, city attorney, city secretary, county manager. You just go through heading of the Citizens Council, and all of these people are African American. Does that make a difference?
Well, it should make a difference, but it takes a commitment. It's funny that you bring that up, is that we had a similar situation in Indianapolis before I came here. The deputy mayor was Nancy Silvers Rogers. Willis Bright was head of the giving at Lilly Endowment Foundation. I was running a $50 million nonprofit organization. And there were a couple of business owners that we made a commitment that we would meet together every other week. We would have dinner together, and we would just talk about coordinated efforts, what was going on in the city, and how we could bring the responsibilities that we had to bear on overcoming the injustices or the situations that needed to be addressed in Indianapolis. Because we were all in positions of influence and had some power. And so we were able to coordinate those things. I think, like in the scenario you just talked about, it is imperative that those leaders not act like crabs in a barrel, but really make a commitment that we're going to coordinate all of our efforts and all of our portfolios and all of our responsibilities. We're going to coordinate that for the betterment of the city, so that, you know, we can take advantage of the positions that we're in. And I would challenge that leadership that you just talked about, as opposed to operating in a vacuum and as opposed to operating like crabs in a barrel. I want more power than this person has. As opposed to that, to overcome those things and say, yes, we make a commitment that while we sit in these seats, we're going to make some positive things happen.
It's the first in a series of conversations with our vice presidents at JBJ Management. And when we finish with all of them, we're going to have a collaboration of thoughts and ideas on what our company is about and what it takes to do business in America in this season as an African-American owned firm. Jon Edmonds is our first vice president. We have 3 more to go. We look forward to explaining more about JBJ Management and doing business. That's our podcast, the JBJ Management Let's Talk About It podcast.